China, a global superpower, has built its empire on manufacturing and holds a powerful advantage: rare minerals. These minerals are used in everything from electronics to military tech. Some say China's control over these resources has forced other countries to bend to its will. But now, something new is rising, a move that could tip the balance of power again. Meanwhile, as the war between Russia and Ukraine hits its third year, things have reached a deadlock. Russia is still trying to move forward, but it's paying a heavy price. Every gain comes with huge losses. That's because Ukraine has managed to strike back hard with strong resistance on the front lines. So the question is, how much longer can this war go on? And in the end, what will Putin actually lose? There are two major things to watch. First, can Ukraine keep fighting? Second, can Russia hold on to what it has taken? Russia is not an open society. People can't protest freely. The government hides the number of deaths and suffering. But even so, Russia won't win unless it can break Ukraine's will to resist. So how has Ukraine managed to hold on for so long against a much larger enemy? The answer is simple: help from the West. For nearly 3 years, Ukraine has survived thanks to military and financial aid from NATO, the European Union, and especially the United States. Since 2014, America has sent $69 billion in support to Ukraine. But here's the question that's now coming to light. What has the U.S. gotten in return? That answer is finally starting to become clear, and it's something that won't sit well with Vladimir Putin. If you dig deeper into the reasons behind Russia's invasion, you'll find something important. The areas Russia attacked aren't just strategic. They're full of natural resources: oil, minerals, and industrial riches. It seems Putin didn't just want control. He wanted to take Ukraine's wealth. But now, President Trump and President Zelensky have struck a blow to those secret plans. After months of back and forth, delays, disappointments, and tough talks, something has finally changed. A long-stuck proposal for a minerals deal between Ukraine and the U.S. has taken its first real step forward. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko and U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signed a memorandum of intent. This is an early agreement that could open the door to a full economic partnership and a fund to help rebuild Ukraine. President Zelensky also confirmed that a larger agreement is in the works. He told reporters that this memorandum is the first step. News sources in Ukraine reported that the U.S. suggested signing this document before a full contract, which would need to go through Ukraine's parliament for approval. There were also strong signals from the U.S. side. President Trump and Secretary Bessent told the press that a full agreement is expected to be signed very soon. Right now, Russia is rumored to be planning a new spring offensive. At the same time, Europe is facing energy and mining shortages. Once the full minerals deal is in place, American companies and their partners will get exclusive rights to explore, extract, and refine Ukraine's natural resources. This could change the economic landscape of Ukraine and lock out Russian influence completely. Ukraine's rare earths and Russia's hidden goals. A deal has just been signed between Ukraine and the United States. While it doesn't promise any direct military protection for Ukraine, the Ukrainian government is hopeful that this step will lead to long-term U.S. support in their fight against Russian occupation. What's different this time is that the agreement includes plans for an investment fund, specifically aimed at rebuilding Ukraine's war-torn economy. But here's what's really surprising. The deal doesn't mention anything about Trump's earlier demand for $500 billion in profits from Ukraine's rare and critical minerals. You might remember, before Trump took office, he had criticized the huge amount of U.S. aid going to Ukraine. At one point, he even suggested cutting it entirely. So far, the total U.S. support given to Ukraine has reached $171 billion. That's a massive amount. But Trump has a different philosophy now. He believes that such aid should come at a cost. He's made it clear. Military aid should be tied to access to Ukraine's natural resources. In his own words, "We want what we put up to go in terms of a guarantee." Trump's message is straightforward. He wants a return on what the U.S. has invested in Ukraine. Since 2014, America has been helping Ukraine. And now Trump says it's time that aid is balanced out by tapping into Ukraine's mineral wealth. He wants future aid to follow this model. Military and financial help in exchange for access to valuable resources. Zelensky, Ukraine's president, has taken a firm position in response. Rather than rejecting the idea, he has moved toward deeper cooperation with the U.S. In fact, he's already called for a more meaningful partnership. That includes agreeing to future resource-based cooperation. So what exactly is the U.S. going to get in exchange for this military and financial help? Let's take a closer look at what both sides are putting on the table. On one hand, Trump recently suggested that Ukraine's rare earths and critical minerals should be included in future negotiations for aid. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. It's something Zelensky himself had brought up months earlier. Trump says that the U.S. is investing hundreds of billions of dollars and that Ukraine is sitting on a massive treasure of rare earth elements. These include lithium, uranium, and titanium, materials that power electric vehicles, electronics, and even advanced weaponry. Together, these minerals are worth trillions of dollars. Trump hasn't said exactly how much of that he expects the U.S. to benefit from, but he's made one thing clear. He wants equity in exchange for the support already given. That's around $66 billion in military aid since the war between Russia and Ukraine escalated. Trump's comments have drawn attention around the world, but Ukraine cannot afford to risk losing American support. It's their lifeline in this war. So Zelensky has put forward a proposal, one that meets both sides halfway. He's offering the U.S. a formal mineral partnership. America keeps helping militarily and financially, and in return gets access to Ukraine's critical mineral supplies. Zelensky has even reviewed the once-secret geological maps of Ukraine's mineral-rich lands. He understands just how valuable these deposits are and how strategic they've become in this war. Ukraine holds a huge reserve of rare earth elements used to build high-performance magnets, electric motors, and electronics. These materials are vital for modern industries and national defense. But not all of it is in Ukraine's hands anymore. Zelensky warned that around 20% of the country's mineral resources and nearly half of its rare earth deposits are now under Russian control. This is more than just a territorial loss. It's a global risk. If Russia controls these resources, it could share them with countries like North Korea or Iran, which could threaten the U.S. and its allies. That's why Zelensky is pushing hard for this mineral partnership to go through. So, what's next? Can Trump actually bring Putin to the table and end the war? As a candidate, Donald Trump once promised to end the war in Ukraine in a single day. It was a bold statement, maybe too bold. Now, as president, both Trump and his advisors are admitting that it might take longer. Negotiations have begun. Trump is using the threat of more tariffs and sanctions to pressure Putin to stop what he calls a ridiculous war. But ending this war isn't as easy as closing a business deal. It's far more complicated. It requires serious strategy, something political scientists call coercive diplomacy. There's a powerful book that Trump's team might want to study. It's not Trump's Art of the Deal. It's a work by political scientist Alexander L. George, titled Forceful Persuasion, Coercive Diplomacy as an Alternative to War. This book explains exactly why resolving conflicts like Ukraine through diplomacy is so difficult, and how it can be done. George's approach is not about using direct military force. Instead, it's about threatening just enough force to make your opponent back down. He describes it as a defensive tactic used after someone else has acted aggressively, like Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Unlike other theorists, George believed in combining threats with offers of compromise. According to him, this mix of pressure and persuasion can sometimes achieve results where brute force fails. George identified three main strategies for coercive diplomacy. 1. Try and see. Make a clear demand and wait to see if the other side responds. 2. Screw tightening. Gradually increase pressure over time. Third ultimatum. Deliver a hard deadline or threat with serious consequences. The first strategy, try and see, has already been attempted by the West. The US and Europe have repeatedly told Russia to pull out of Crimea and other occupied areas. But Russia has refused. The second strategy, screw tightening, has been in motion since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. The West has slowly ramped up sanctions and military pressure. It's caused real damage to the Russian economy and military, but so far, it hasn't forced Putin to negotiate. That leaves one option: the ultimatum. This is the most aggressive and high-stakes strategy. It's also the one that could finally push Putin to the negotiating table, if used correctly. Now, with rare earths, global stakes, and Ukraine's survival hanging in the balance, the US may have a new card to play. If the mineral partnership is finalized and America gains long-term access to Ukraine's resources, it could reshape both the war and the peace process. The world is watching closely. The war in Ukraine has been going on for years now, and each day that passes, it becomes more than just a regional fight. For Russia, it's about reclaiming influence. For Ukraine, it's about survival. And for the West, it's a test of strategy, resilience, and long-term resolve. But since 2022, the West hasn't been able to put a clear ultimatum on the table for Russia. Instead, we've heard phrases like, "as long as it takes," which sounds firm, but what does that really mean? How long is as long as it takes? Rather than pushing for decisive diplomacy, the West has been trying to wear Russia down through military support, economic sanctions, and a belief that Russia will eventually cave under pressure. But this isn't a war of negotiation anymore. It's a slow, exhausting grind. And that's a problem. Because Ukraine is perhaps the worst kind of war for this strategy. Coercive diplomacy doesn't work well in zero-sum games, situations where both sides believe they absolutely must win. And right now, Russia holds the advantage. More troops, more resources, more tolerance for pain. On top of that, there's almost no trust left. Putin doesn't believe the West will ever lift sanctions, even if he agrees to a deal. Ukraine, burned by broken promises in 1994 and again in 2014, doesn't trust anything Russia says either. President Zelensky knows this war won't end on a handshake or a headline. Ukraine needs real security guarantees, tangible weapons, defense systems, long-term protection. Not vague promises that vanish when the cameras are off. Now, there's a wild card entering the picture: former U.S. President Donald Trump. And whether people support him or not, he has a history of shaking things up. When Trump makes a threat, people notice. His foreign policy is all about pressure and unpredictability. In fact, when he told Putin to stop the war, he did it while also threatening Colombia and China in the same breath. That's the Trump way: chaotic, but sometimes effective. Even Zelensky admitted he hopes Trump's unpredictability is aimed at Russia. Because, let's face it, if anyone might rattle Putin, it's Trump. Russia's economy is cracking. Ukraine is hitting targets deeper inside Russia. And if Trump plays it right, he might just push for something Biden never could. A ceasefire, or even a peace deal. But let's be clear. Peace won't just fall into place. Putin still thinks he's winning. Getting him to pull back will take more than a speech or a threat. It'll require a smart, strategic approach rooted in real-world diplomacy. That means learning from the playbook of political expert Alexander George, who outlined 4 key principles for effective coercive diplomacy. First, be specific. Don't make vague threats. Lay out what Russia must do, by when, and what happens if they don't. Second, mix pressure with incentives. Sometimes even small rewards, like lifting minor sanctions, can encourage movement. Third, start small. Don't aim for a full peace treaty on day one. Begin with steps like prisoner exchanges or ceasefires. Build momentum. Fourth, cool the temperature. Escalating tensions too fast can backfire. Calm negotiation beats emotional standoffs. If Trump leans into these principles, he might succeed where others failed. But behind the headlines, something even bigger is unfolding. Something that could reshape the world economy. Because Ukraine isn't just a war zone, it's a resource powerhouse. Turns out, Ukraine has massive reserves of minerals that power the modern world. Lithium, graphite, titanium, and more. These are the materials that drive electric vehicles, smartphones, fighter jets, and even nuclear energy. Right now, China controls much of the world's rare earth supply. And with tensions rising, Xi Jinping has made it clear. He could cut off exports whenever he wants. So now, with the US under pressure and China tightening its grip, Ukraine has made a bold offer. Zelensky put it plainly. You helped us the most, so you should benefit the most. In other words, Ukraine wants to give America access to its mineral wealth, in exchange for investment, security, and support. Ukraine's central regions, like Dnipro, are packed with rare earth minerals. Old Soviet maps show just how valuable this land is, and Russia knows it. That's why they've always wanted control over these regions. By partnering with Ukraine, the US could finally cut dependence on Chinese minerals. No more bottlenecks. No more manipulation. Ukraine has 22 of the 34 critical minerals identified by the EU, 5% of the world's rare earth reserves. It's enough to power the next generation of green tech, advanced weapons, and AI infrastructure. Titanium for aircraft, gallium for radar, lithium for EVs, graphite for steel and batteries, all within reach, if the West is willing to invest. This is more than just a war. It's a turning point. With the right deals, Ukraine could become a strategic supplier to the West, offering both security and economic independence from China. So, as Trump steps back onto the global stage, and the world watches closely, the stakes are no longer just about missiles or troops. They're about minerals, influence, and the future of the global order.